Jason Fladlin here with a user request. Nikolai here wrote into our help desk, and I'm going to paraphrase what he said, and I'm going to give the answer to it. His question was, Jason, if you were to create a funnel with the goal to book a call for a high-ticket service/offer, how would you go about doing that? Would you give something for free as bait? Would you send people to a video sales letter or a case study from a successful client and then have them book on a Calendly form or something like that? And then he says, I don't like this part. He says, I know that he prefers to gather everyone in one place and sell them and live his life instead of getting on the phone. But I'd really like to know his train of thought and the potential method for this. So Nikolai, you ask and you shall receive, my friend. I think you're going to be very shocked with this answer that I'm going to give to you. It's probably counterproductive to what everybody else is saying out there, but hey, I know a thing or two about this, so let's get to work. First of all, you need to know there isn't a model. If you were my client, we would have to figure out your context to determine what model is having the highest likelihood of success that we would try first. And part of that context is, what is the offer itself? Who is the market that the offer is being positioned towards? What are your current capabilities and resources that you have at hand to leverage this? And so we learned this early on working with webinars for clients, is if they couldn't present, it doesn't matter how good the damn webinar is. We either got to bring talent in somewhere else or we got to throw the webinar out of the toolbox. Because the capabilities internally were like, nobody can get in front of customers and speak coherently. Okay, well, we won't use that one then. So the model would be most likely shaped around capabilities and resources you currently have as they relate to the offer in the market. So when people say high ticket, that can mean anything. So high ticket in a weight loss market is a very smaller number compared to high ticket in a financial market. And even within those markets, high ticket would range from, say, like $5,000 to $40,000. In a lot of the markets where you see a lot of high ticket. Generally, high ticket starts at $5,000 and it ends at $40,000. I've seen it go up to $100,000, $200,000, or even more. In certain instances, in certain markets, corporate and enterprise markets, high ticket could be $1 million or a multi-million-dollar contract. So that would heavily influence the model. So nobody goes after the whole market. If they do, they're crazy. We want to carve the market up. What slice of the market are we going at specifically? And that would also influence the model, because we look at that slice of market and we say, are there any biases in how they make decisions? And if so, we should work within a framework that meets them where they're at. Don't try to force them to go through what we think is best on how they consume information. How do they already consume it? Can we do it in that format? Would that work? And that's how we kind of play with it. So I'm going to give you a couple different models that we worked with clients. And I think these models capture about 80% of the circumstances out there. So believe it or not, at one point in time in my life, Zoom brought me in and they said, hey, listen, we get a lot of people that sign up for our Zoom meetings. And then some of them turn into Zoom webinar customers, but they don't stick. And they went public, so they're not selling out. But a huge value on how they determine the company's worth is annual reoccurring revenue or monthly reoccurring revenue, ARR or MRR. Depends on a lot of factors and which one is preferable. But nonetheless, if somebody signs up for a Zoom webinar account, how long do they stay an active paying member in good standing? And at that point in time, I don't know if the metrics have changed, is a lot of clients would sign up and they would cancel within a month or two. It was very, very small. My CEO at the time, Dolan White, just an unbelievable, beautiful human being. He somehow worked a deal with those guys to get me in front of Zoom to speak to their customer base. And the pitch was very obvious. Hey, listen, if we can get your customers to do webinars, that's the number one reason somebody would stick or not. If they can't get a webinar live and it ain't successful, they shouldn't be paying you. But if we can help them get webinars live and those webinars are successful, they'll have to pay you so they can continue to run the webinar. And we said to them, hey, listen, is it okay then when we do these trainings that we solicit clients? Because if we just do the webinar for them, they're going to be happy and they don't have to do it. And it increases your likelihood that you're going to have a reoccurring customer. So they said, that makes sense. By the way, lesson in and of itself, if you don't ask, you'll never get. I don't care if it's a multi-billion-dollar company. Ask. Worst they can say is no, and then you can negotiate. So I came in and I did a webinar, and the webinar funnel worked like this. I gave the book away on the webinar. And when they went to get the book, they opted in for the book, and on the thank you page of the book, they said, would you like to have a conversation of how you can best implement the techniques that are in the book? If so, book a call with one of our agents. And then they would book a call on the calendar. And I can't remember the specific close rates on these in terms of from the webinar to a book call, because this was several years ago. It was right before they went public. They IPO'd in April, and we did the training in February of that year. I think it was 42%. 42% of the people that opted in to get the book booked a call. Crazy, right? And we were selling a service that started at $30,000 per client, and in many instances had royalties attached to it based upon performance. It was incredible. The way that I did this on this webinar was at the very beginning. It was like 2 minutes in. I said like, hey, Jason Fladlin here. I'm going to show you the 3 most critical things that are likely to meet with success on webinars. And I'm going to drill down into them ever so deeply, not as deeply as I could, because it would take much longer than the time we have together. However, I have drilled very deeply in this one location, and if you go to rapidcrush.com/Zoom, you could get the book for free. That link doesn't work anymore, by the way, but that was a call to action at the time. These are the elements that are most important. Of these, the presentation is the most important. I'm not going to be able to get into the full depth of the presentation today, but I wrote a book on it. You can go here and you can get the book. So within 2 minutes of the webinar, I'm doing a call to action for them to opt in. And the cadence was essentially every time I had some masterful insight over that webinar, I'd say, and if you want to know more, you can go to rapidcrush.com/Zoom and get the book. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 calls to actions throughout the Zoom call to get them to book the call. And I like that model because I'm damn good at webinars. So why wouldn't I use a webinar? And that speaks to the point that Nikolai said earlier too, is like, I have no issue getting on a phone with people. I do like the efficiency of the one-to-many situation. I just think it's more efficient. It doesn't work for every market. It doesn't always make sense, but more than any other tool, I have found the webinar to be the most flexible tool online. And so I would use a webinar in a situation with clients that are familiar with webinars and comfortable with webinars. It would not be the normal webinar, not the webinar that I teach in this book even. That's a whole different model. It'd be the webinar kind of structurally like I just talked to you about here, where there's multiple calls to actions throughout, including in the first few minutes. And then they could book a call from the webinar. Now, there's another client that I did this for, Joe Polish. And there was an article that was written about this that Ben Hardy, who's a friend of mine, wrote, I think for Inc. magazine. You can Google it, because Joe ended up paying me, I can't remember how much. It was like $75,000 and $125,000. I know that. Because we were on a call one day, and Joe was like, I want my sales team to be able to close more effectively when people come in and want to join Genius Network, which is a $25,000 offer. And I had suggested to him that if they don't have training, it's like handing the keys to the Mercedes or the Cadillac to the 16-year-old kid who just got his license and expecting him to take care of it. And so he said, hey, how would you go about doing it? How would you create the training? I said, well, I don't have the time. But if I had the time, I would sit there and I would do the phone calls myself, and then they would create documentation as a result of those phone calls, and then the documentation would make the manual that they could study, and then they could listen to the calls. And then he says, how much do you charge for a day of consulting? I said, $25,000. How many hours do you think it would take to do these calls? I gave him the number, and he says, okay, let me just pay you. If it's X number of days, I'll pay you for X number of days. That's why I can't remember if it was 3 days or 5 days. So it would either be $75,000 or $125,000. And I said, okay. I said, I'll do that, and then I'll design the model for you. And so the model went like this. I wrote an article called Producers and Parasites. And we sent it out to every lead and every prospect that we could possibly get our hands on in Joe's internal list, his database, and so on and so forth. And it was a pretty on-the-nose type of article. Producers and parasites, where it says a lot of people in business think they're producers, but they're actually parasites. Here's the difference between the two. The first part of the article was framed at if you are a high-leveraged individual, if you want to be a player in the market, if you want to be a top-level successful person, you have to know the difference between those that you serve, if they're producers or parasites. But then the second half of the article certainly transitioned into, if you are a producer, we want to talk to you. But if you're not a producer, that's okay. The article is going to tell you how to become a producer, but you're not the type of person we want to talk to. And I'm paraphrasing here. I did a much more better job. It's easier to do it when you sit down and spend a couple hours writing the damn article and are very purposeful with it. But we got people to self-identify and say, yes, I'm an absolute producer. And I want to talk to them because Joe's creating a situation for his annual event, which is a $10,000 offer that we were selling on the phone call. So it was a $10,000 offer. If we knew we got him at the event, like 90% of people who come to the $10,000 deal upgrade to $25,000 because they truly get to experience the experience. And then they know it's a good deal. That's the tough part about marketing is people don't know how good your stuff is until after they pay for it, not before. And so we had them identify and say, yes, I'm a producer. Our premise was if we put the right producers in the room, that's where magic happens. And so if you're a producer, you're going to find the perfect home. If you're not, you wouldn't be welcome here anyway. So we get them to read the article, which was 1,000, 1,500 words. At the end, there was 5 questions. And one of those questions was, would you be in a position to invest $10,000 in Genius Network annual event if it made sense for you? And we didn't talk to anybody who didn't say yes to all 5 of those questions. And I can't remember what the other 4 were, but they were qualifying questions. And then we went on, and Joe and I did the calls together, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And the close rate was insane. Now, obviously, I stacked the deck in my favor. I don't play a fair game. This is business. I play an unfair game where we stack value so damn high that it makes the pitch so damn easy to the right person. But we went on and we did these calls. What I loved about this is I was supposed to lead these calls, but Joe, this is the attitude he had. He started leading these calls. And I just kind of sat there and did nothing other than listen and occasionally wade in. But if he hadn't hired me, the thing would have never happened. And it would have never got executed upon. And I think that's really important there. But the short of it is if you can send people to an article, a long-form article, and then at the end of the article, there's a few questions that will qualify or disqualify them. And then if they're qualified, getting on the call and talking to them. That's a very powerful model. Now, the most common model is, here's a free gift, opt in to get it. And then on the thank you page, there's like a 5 to 8 minute video, talking head video, or a hybrid video sales letter where the first few minutes are you talking and then you switch to some slides. And at the end of it, there's a call to action to book a call. That's the catch-all. That's what a lot of people are doing these days. And there's nothing wrong with that. That may make sense for you in your particular setup with the context. But I wouldn't just force it into the marketing because you see multiple other people using it right now. The thing with models like this is when they become too popular, they quit working because the user gets tired of seeing the same thing over and over again. And then you have to adjust anyway. That's why I'm never too attached to anything that's hot or the flavor that works right now. I'm aware of it. We can use it if possible, but it may not be the model that I reach out to first. Now, let me give you, Nikolai, and anybody else listening, the ideal model in the sense of probably the most useful thing to the listeners here on YouTube on how they would go about doing this in the real world. The ideal thing is you have an email list and then you book via consistent follow-ups. So you're emailing quite frequently and you're letting them know the recent developments in the market, what's going on. And then you're always tying them up to, oh, and we can help with that. Or that's why we designed this thing in this way. You want to talk about it, et cetera, et cetera. Some of your emails that are going out are the recent wins. Hey, we tried this on for a client. It worked out really good. Do you sound like this client? If so, we should talk about it. Maybe it'll work for you too. Or, hey, the other day I was working on this thing and I had this insight, which I thought was very interesting because this is what we also do for the right kind of clients. Are you the right client? If so, go here, book a call, we'll figure it out. Or here's a lesson I learned. If you need help applying this lesson, talk to somebody and we can help you either informally with some advice or formally if you want to partner with us. That kind of thing. That's the ideal model. Now, the problem with this is most people don't have an email list. So that goes back to those limiting of capabilities. Most people don't have a phone room of people that are closers. Most of the closers are not good. Most people don't have the lead flow to fill the calendar. Most people are not ready to scale. Just because you sell it doesn't mean you should. You know, it's the whole Bill Gates thing of more companies die of indigestion than starvation, right? These are all the things we have to consider. And so a lot of the people that I talk to who want to do this model of like a high ticket phone room, they are often in this situation where they don't even know how to ride the bike without training wheels and they want to fly the jet. It's like, yeah, I get that all these guys are making it rain money, but they've built these in-house sales teams over a long period of time. And it seems easy on the surface, but it really isn't. And we can't go too fast too soon. So here's the most useful model that I can give to most people right now where they're at that's going to lead to the highest likelihood of success with the least amount of risk. You ready for it? Here's what you do first. You do the calls yourself. Only you. And you don't do too many of them. You have a limited scarce resource, which is your time. And you could only book a certain amount of calls per week. Whether that's artificial or intentional, it doesn't matter. You limit yourself to a small amount of calls you can do per week, and you do every one of them damn calls yourself. So this stacks the deck highest in your favor for winning, because nobody's going to be able to sell your product or your thing like you. Or if you're working for somebody else, you still are the one doing the sales, because you will learn more about it that way than any other way possible. Your whole focus is not just on selling, though. Your whole focus is on winning with your clients. So make the sell, but sell the person that's a laydown for a win, where you can do the least amount of stuff and get the most results for that client. Because now you will stimulate word of mouth. Now you will also stimulate the capabilities of having more resources, of case studies and so on and so forth that you can do. But the word of mouth will increase demand. You want to build a situation where you can't take all the leads anymore. There's too many of them, and there's only one of you. You know now better who to hire, and you know what words need to come out of other people's lips in order to make the sell. You now know your clientele better as a result, so you can partition and create funnels and models that speak to that clientele. And ideally, you have these people sitting on calls with you when you hire them and say, let me show you how it's done, youngin', and you have them shadow you for a while. And then you put them out in situations. So you scale slow and responsibly at first. But at the beginning, you do it all on your own back. This is how mostly this stuff is done. You do it on your own back, and then you slowly build it out for the next person, the next person, the next person. And then you end up having a model over time that you are building backwards. You're like, okay, if this is the ideal client, what's the one step they need to hear before that to get on the call? Oh, it's this. What's the one step before that they need to know that you even can book a call with me? Oh, it's this. Here's how we get a stranger in the middle of a crowded environment to be interested in what we have to offer. This is the bait we use, so on and so forth. So it's never an easy answer, is it? But it's always kind of easy at the same time. You knew it. You knew it before you asked, probably. Was that you? If not, also just realize there are more than one way to the top of the mountain. And what's more important than anything is trying something, see what happens, adjusting it, and trying it again. How's that land for you? Let me know. I'll see you in the next video. Talk soon. Peace.